Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. Patience Ogunbona here. And today I'm on Inspiration to Achieve, another exciting episode of Inspiration to Achieve. And this is a show, a live session where I share inspiration to help you to turn your aspirations into transformation, to achieve your life goals or your business goals and thrive. And today, on this special edition, I'm having rich conversations with my guest, Sharon Hurley Hall. And we will be talking today about introverts versus extroverts, the Black woman's experience and the Black woman's perspective. So I'm looking forward to this session today. And maybe you had a sneak peek of Sharon. That was a sneak peek, but she's coming back on. I wanted to be able to have the space to talk a little bit about her. So why is she a special guest, and why do I think Sharon will give us a good time today? Well, I met Sharon by, through LinkedIn. And I found LinkedIn to be a very exciting place to meet interesting people. And when I decided I wanted to connect with her, I first of all engaged with her post. And I loved it. There were some that were making me laugh out loud. And I thought, okay, this is really nice. So when I introduced myself in a chat and I said, I would love to connect. I love what you said about this. And she was like, yeah, happy to connect. But then I then said, if you ever want to chat, feel free. And she said, oh, yeah, I love a chat. I was actually surprised. I was like, yay, somebody hasn't met me, but she's willing. And we had a nice time on top of the fact that I'm jealous of where she lives. But, without further ado, I would want you to meet Sharon properly. But just to let you know that I'm coming to you live on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and you can access the replay to this on YouTube. And I just want to do a quick text so that we know that myself and Sharon are coming to you properly and you can see us. So bear with me just 1 second and then we'll be good to go. So like I said, today is a great day for great conversations and we're going to be starting. So let me introduce Sharon over to you and let Sharon introduce herself. Hi, Sharon.
Hi, Patience. It's a pleasure to be here. Happy to be here. So thanks for that lovely introduction. I would want to say I'm versatile. What I would call a multi-potentialite is one of the terms I've come across. Yeah. So I am a former journalist. I am a B2B writer, mostly for SaaS companies. I'm an anti-racism writer and educator. Now, my education background is I used to teach journalism at Coventry University in the UK. And now I'm teaching anti-racism courses and freelance writing courses with Beyond School. I co-host a podcast, the Introvert Sisters. I have masters in media and education. And I am the founder of the catchily named Sharon's Anti-Racism newsletter. So that's me.
Yes. And, before I met you, I hadn't come across the term anti-racism, but I also noticed that you use the word shadism. So I don't know. I would want that education and that enlightenment because obviously the big elephant in the room is that the racism talk is kind of what we're choosing to focus as a world, whether we like it or not. It is what is loudest, whether we want to hear it or not. It's loud now. The pain is real, and all of us have to face up to understanding what is in front of us, because this generation is lucky that things are not being put under the carpet. They're being, wrestled strongly, and aptly we have choose to challenge as well. So tell us a bit about what anti-racism and shadism all means.
Okay, so obviously we all know what racism is, that insidious discrimination, that sometimes that systemic discrimination against people of color. And that's the short version of the definition. Let's not get down in the weeds on that. Anti-racism is fighting that. But in my view, that is being active about it, being intentional about it, right? It's not just giving yourself the label of an anti-racist. It's actually doing something in your small way to fight it. So my way of doing that is by educating and sharing stories through my newsletter and teaching classes. Getting on to Shadism, which it's interesting actually. When I first wrote about this, which was quite a while ago, although I only published a book recently, I published a book called Exploring Shadeism. And Shadism was what we call discrimination against people on the basis of the shade of their skin. And it grows out of colonialism. It grows out of racism. It grows out of that white is right mentality that is common in post-enslavement and post-colonial societies. And it's more commonly called colorism now, but it's basically the same thing. I actually learned that, it doesn't just exist among Black people. It exists among Indian people as well through their caste system. So they also experience colorism within their society. And again, lighter shades are always presumed to be better. And what the interesting thing about it is that in a way you can find in these many societies that you internalize that attitude. In the days of enslavement, obviously, if the darker you were, generally the more menial jobs you had, the lighter you were, the better jobs you had. And so in order to achieve some sort of social mobility, it was being lighter was prized. Even immediately after that, and here I can only speak knowledgeably for the Caribbean context. There was a time in my...
Before you carry on, why are you speaking for the Caribbean context? Tell us where you are. Really very jealous about where you are at the moment.
I am in Barbados. In Barbados. Like many Caribbean people, I was born in Britain, but I grew up in the Caribbean. And now live in Barbados.
Yeah.
And
okay. So carry on the Caribbean.
Yeah, and so certainly even in my grandparents' time, there were certain jobs that you would only qualify for if you were a certain skin shade. If you were, if you wanted to work in a bank or financial institution, your skin had to be a certain lightness. I would not qualify. Okay. And what was interesting to me a couple of years ago when I launched Exploring Shadeism, in the days when we could still gather in person, right? Was that, there were some younger people who attended the launch and they said, this is still going on today, right? We're still experiencing this kind of almost, a distinction among people based on skin shade, a kind of de facto segregation that takes place in some spaces where, in Barbados, for example, white people and Black people, for the most part, locals I'm talking about, right? Locals, they will come together where they have to for work and school, but outside of that, they don't often socialize,
Wow. Yeah.
Right?
I think it's the way the world, I can see Lorraine on LinkedIn confirming with you. She said Shadism exists in other Asian cultures as well: Chinese, Taiwanese, Japanese, Filipinos. And it's right. Our world is divided. Yes, and our world. And I was thinking about it 2 days ago, and I said, when you look at me, you don't see me necessarily. You see your perception of me. And immediately your brain is looking for all the things about a person like me to be able to access it to be able to define me and then connect with me. And I think that's where education, like what you're doing, and bringing it to the fore, or helping people to be aware. And that's why conversations about bias or the unconscious nature of it, or whether the conscious one by choice, that needs to continue to happen. So yeah, this is a conversation that we can keep having. I just
Yeah.
wanted to you to share on the courageous, because I think hard conversations need courage to be had. It's when you tag yourself with something specific, people tend to challenge that, and you have to courageously always stand by that and represent that, be a voice in that area. And I find similar with the topic we're going to talk today. So I wonder why you always choose the hard bits. So, so basically, we're talking about introvert versus extroverts, and we're going to put the perspective of the Black woman and the culture and all that stuff, because sometimes culture can impact introversion. That's the way I see it. But again, you can prove me wrong. I want us to have that conversation. So I think for starters, it's worth kind of exploring, the introverts versus extroverts. What would you say, if you were to talk about the similarities or differences? What would you say an introvert is and an extrovert is, just in plain language, not any textbook definitions?
Okay. I think the main difference is that introverts find it difficult to go for extended period with a lot of external stimulation. They thrive more on their inner world and being able to have time to relax and think. And extroverts get their energy from being in those more busy situations, the same ones that tend to drain introverts. I think there's often a perception that introverts are sitting in a corner, curled up, away from the world all the time and unable to even string a couple of sentences together. That's not true at all. In fact, many introverts go into the writing and creative professions, so they're actually very good with language, possibly because they spend
And
a
very
lot of
loud,
time
actually,
thinking about
that.
it. They can be, but they're not necessarily loud in large group settings. They're loud with their creative work. And also, I think, I've completely lost my train of thought, but never mind.
So, for introverts versus extroverts, in my view, I feel one of the big things is to recognize that it's not just stimulus. So it's stimulus that is overwhelming, that is loud, that is quantity as well. We're talking about. So it could be noise. It could be, I find personally, as an introvert, that, and I didn't realize this until until much later as I studied, that the things that affect me, even substances like coffee, it can be linked to introversion. Oh, hi Nala on Facebook. Yeah, apparently.
That's
Because
interesting.
when I was younger, my mom used to say, don't take strong drinks, don't take strong things, you have a weak brain. I just, and I used to think weak brain. But I knew she wasn't saying you are not intelligent. She just said you can't tolerate it. So obviously I didn't take alcohol or anything, but I was taking coffee and I wouldn't sleep. I had extreme reactions. I would take coffee and it would be like I'm drunk, and things like that. And
that is really interesting, because that happened to me once when I do drink coffee in moderation, But I do remember one occasion where I had several cups of coffee at a short space of time. And you're right, it was like being tipsy, I was very, very bubbly, unusually so.
So it's those,
I had no idea.
Is the extreme reactions that you have. I hated light. In fact, in the service where I met my husband, my friends, one of my friends nicknamed me the mole, because he said, you like dark spaces. And it wasn't deliberate. I just enter a room and the light affects me. Suddenly, if I'm in a space and there's a lot of noise, the concentration reduces. I can't grab what is being. And even when I'm watching something, my husband likes noise, even though he says he's an introvert. But I don't. So we have different spectrums.
Absolutely.
Regardless of that, we also grow to the point where people think you can definitely not be an introvert. For example, when I met you and you said, guess what? I'm an introvert. I was like, really? So I was kind of sharing the same perception that people have when they meet me. Because I have a friend, Heidi, and she said, you, an introvert? I've met you. I said, yes, I know. But that's the thing. But that's the thing. It's an inbuilt thing. So basically, the truth about it is, do you think it's curable?
Why would you want to cure it? I think I think introversion is great.
Yes.
And it's funny, people that know you well tend to have this perception that you could never be introverted. But the thing is that you are not you don't display what they think of as introversion with people that you know well. But I've educated my friends over the years, if we're going out tonight, don't look for me to do something tomorrow night. I'm going to need to recharge. You introverts can go and party 3 nights in a row. I'm one night and I need some recharge time, right? Yeah. I can be completely on that first night, but if I were to try to do it more, it just wouldn't go well.
And I think it's the reason why I asked the question around cure is because you cure what is an issue, what is a disease. So the thing I said about what my mom said about me, plus what I found myself experiencing, the way I was experiencing the world, I did struggle with myself. And most introverts do, because the world, unfortunately, is like we talk about a male-dominated world. It's an extrovert-dominated world. Things are created, spaces and structures and many things, systems are set up to meet the requirements of certain people. That's why inclusivity is very important. That's why equality is important. It's not because, so for me, realizing that there was nothing wrong with me. It was just a type of person, a type of personality, an inbuilt default way of being. And that was like, suddenly I was like, I love being myself. I just needed to know that it wasn't something that needed a psych word or something.
Yes, I agree with you. I mean, when I was young, people would say, oh, she's so shy. Oh, she's so shy. And it was presented as if that was a very negative thing. Yeah. I didn't learn the language around introversion until much later. And then I said, oh, so this is just a personality type. Well, I can deal with that. There's nothing wrong with it. This is not something I need to get over. This is something that I can live with and I can thrive with. And so that is a total shift in attitude. And
I think that the other thing is to mention, when we talk about differences and challenges, I wanted to talk a little bit about, so there are some points I put here to help us really nail it down. So when you're talking about, do you think there's a difference in intelligence? Does introversion, extroversion affect intelligence?
Okay, I'm no scientist, but no, I don't believe so. I think we have different ways of processing the world, and we possibly have different strengths and weaknesses. For example, in a team setting, you need introverts and extroverts. The introverts are going to go and do the deep research and the work and put everything together beautifully, and the extroverts are going to do a fantastic job of presenting it.
Yes.
Right? Just to give one example.
And I think that they present it, even introverts, when given the opportunity to prepare well, which is what the difference is, they present it well. And according to Susan Cain, which is very interesting, introverts perform better in higher education than extroverts, and extroverts perform better in primary school and basically higher education. When I say higher education, that university and so on. And the reason is because the perception that people have of a very clever child can be the one that puts up their hand and talks a lot, maybe shouts the answer in class, whereas the introvert child might be in a corner thinking about it. But of course, they're nerdy, so sometimes they're regarded as nerdy or whatever, but they might not contribute as much. But when you get to a space where it's not about putting up your hand and showing off, and it's just about doing the academic work, apparently then introverts then begin to shine. So it's just that difference. So
and
carry on.
Can I mention that bringing back our initial focus on the racism, there's a way in which the racist perceptions and perceptions of introverts can sometimes come together. So I have a story to tell, which is that I was doing some training in the UK. I went for one of these, when I was looking for a job, I went to one of these job training things. And the guy was up there, you know, he was presenting, and I said nothing because I was just listening. To be honest, I wasn't learning that much. And then I did the test afterwards, aced it. And when he called me in to discuss the results, he said, well, I just assumed that you were not grasping what was going on. And so there was an element of, here's this Black woman, she's way out of her depth. But there's also an element of, this is my introverted personality, because I wasn't waving my hand and rushing to participate. There was an element of that as well. But what he learned, and what I think a lot of people learn about introverts, is that just because we're quiet, it doesn't mean that nothing is going on. In fact, it's when we're quietest that the most is happening in our brains.
And I think also the concept of quiet, someone did describe me as quiet when I was younger. And it was more because I came out with this shocking stuff when I spoke. And in the African, so I'm kind of blending it all to talk about how culture can impact as well, where they say kids are to be seen and not heard, for example. And already an introvert child doesn't talk a lot, but then when they talk, it's quite heavy, it's quite big. And it's like, I'd rather you don't talk because what you say kind of gets offensive. And that was my situation. It wasn't that I love to talk when I had something important and deep to say. That always rattled people's cages, and that will always make them uncomfortable. So around me, you hear adults say, "Who asked you? Keep quiet," you know, kind of thing. So I went further into my shell. I basically retreated, and I remember sitting down and my mom's friend walking into the house, and she said, and my mom was calling me and she said, "Oh, why do you always disturb this quiet girl?" And I let out this knowing smile and said, "I'm definitely not a quiet girl. I just choose now to not talk because it's pointless. When I talk, I want to say something reasonable, you know." And it's like, so I think that's one. The other bit before we move on into how introversion actually works in culture, do you think there's a difference as well between introverts and extroverts when it comes to confidence?
That is a tough one, Patience, because I think my perception is that extroverts find it easier to just put themselves out there at any given stage, whereas it's much harder for introverts. I think a well-prepared introvert can be confident while still not enjoying the experience of being out in so many people, in front of so many people. I remember when I first started teaching, my first day, I prepared, right? So I felt I was prepared, but there were 140 students in the class. And it was a really terrifying experience for an introvert. And so I clutched the podium and I gabbled because I was nervous, right? And, you know, in the end, I finished the class a few minutes early, which nobody minded. But, you know, it took a little time to get into the flow of it and learn to slow down. I was always confident that I was prepared. I was prepared in terms of my material, but I had to also prepare myself mentally in terms of I'm going into this space with 100+ people that I have to talk to. But I tell you what, it was an excellent preparation for the rest of my life, because I learned from that even as an introvert, I can do those things. So that's why I can come and talk to you, because this is never going to be as scary as that day standing up in front of 140 people.
And I think also it's what society sees as confidence as well. Because just because you don't come out loud and shout, "Yay," walk up to the stage and go, "Yay," brash, or not brash because that's harsh, I think that's the other thing when I work with my introverted, clients. They always say, I don't want to come out as cocky. And I said, that's the problem, you see. So introverts see that loudness as cockiness. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. And extroverts think, oh, coming out real sublime and just delivering what you want to deliver is kind of, oh, what's the make some noise. I'm sure it's an extrovert that created that make some noise plan.
No,
so it's like
no. Let's not make any noise, please.
So I think that's where I feel, I don't think there's a difference, but I think that because of the challenges that an introverted woman has had to go through to get heard and get seen, gradually your confidence can be knocked, because by the time you're ready to talk, the meeting is over. And you're not going to be seen as the clever one in the room. You're not going to be seen as the strong one, the opinionated one. And therefore, you gradually it begins to chip on your inside as an introvert. But, so it's recognizing that, isn't it? What do you think from that?
What I think is that introverts have to play to their strengths.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you know that you're going to be the last one to speak in a meeting, right? You prepare for the meeting in advance, and you send it, and you get your thoughts down in writing, and you send it to the person who's leading the meeting. You will, right? And then they might ask you about it, and then you are already prepared to talk about it, right? So sometimes you have to pre-handle the situation. And I'm not saying it's always easy. I really totally identify with that experience of sitting in a meeting, and for the whole of the meeting you might speak once, if at all, right? But when you then have a one-on-one conversation afterwards, then people are saying, well, boy, that's a really good idea, right? Because you've had time to process, right? So sometimes I think you have to make yourself be seen by using your strengths. And if your strengths are writing down your ideas, then send emails to the people, right, with your ideas.
I'm really picking up on that, make yourself be seen, because I know definitely that the introverts, or generally being introverted or working with introverts, that putting pictures on, be seen, let yourself be seen, giving yourself, I did a topic last week, permission, allowing yourself to be, it's not going to be ever comfortable. And I think one way to do that is to accept it. At some point, it will become a routine. It will become an act. You can put up that, because like there's different spectrums of introversion. Oh, we've lost Sharon a little bit. Okay, you're back. Glad. So basically, myself and yourself probably will be regarded as what they call the social introvert. So basically, and that's because adaptability is about adapting. And if you define visibility as being loud and being in your face, an introvert would withdraw. And I defined visibility today for my group on Facebook. I said it's allowing your message to reach the people you want it to reach, but also having impact. And that depth of definition makes sense to an introvert. And they'll go, yeah. And I think sometimes what you've got to do then is pay the price. And the price is being seen so that message gets heard. Because people also don't trust people, like how many people would trust somebody whose picture is not on their profile? I would be like, I can't see your face. I'm not sure I'll accept your connection. So, but it's only because people are withdrawn. And it's very, hi, Diane from Ireland on LinkedIn joining us. So basically, it's only from, understanding that that's what people will be thinking. I know that they say generally, if you see people without their pictures on their profile, they are more likely to be an introvert. And then I'm thinking, that is okay, fine, but you've got to recognize what the perception is about you from not doing, just the norm. There's some things that are the norm, yet they are not harmful. You can do that. So that's one of the things. So I think, that's important. So I wanted to actually share with you, or ask you to share with us actually, your lived experience from growing up. You've shared a little bit about it through the conversation now, but what are some of the things that you would say you have experienced that it's because you are introverted? And so people who are watching this would also be able to say, yeah, actually, that happened to me, but also I'm coming from it at it from the point of view of, we did say that we're talking about the Black woman's perspective as well. So, and I know that maybe there is culture, there is nature versus nurture that can increase introversion, and I probably touched on it a little bit. So maybe sharing from your own point of view how nature versus nurture, culture, and all that stuff can, impact on being introverted or not. Yeah.
Okay, that is kind of an interesting one. And so I have sort of different experiences at different stages of my life. So I grew up in the Caribbean, where it was fine to be quiet up to a point, say in class, although I was never the one that volunteered for anything. And so again, I think, people would, I was never the visible one. It's very interesting, actually, because I met up with some friends recently, and I've known them for years at this point, and they say, "Wait, didn't you used to be quiet?" Right? That was their perception, right? Because I was not the one putting myself out there. I was not the one participating in things. I was not the one, but what's interesting to me also is that I think there are people that notice the quiet ones. Sometimes.
So I guess before the question, I also think is, now that you're saying it, do you think places like, so we're known for our color, brightness and everything, the Caribbean and the Africans as well. So when you're talking about you're not the one who's, out there, I just started thinking about the fact that in a party where you see people, where you see Africans, the videos of Africans, they are twerking, all this. You would not find me being that African.
No.
So is it probable that African societies, or maybe like Caribbean societies, are probably by nature actually extroverted? So the introvert can struggle because you don't belong. In a sense, where Caribbean, you're loud music, all those kind of things.
I often feel like the whole world is a bit, as you said, biased towards extroversion. I don't know in terms of the Caribbean, because I've come to realize lately that there are a lot more introverts around than I thought there were. So yes, there's definitely that sort of ebullience, that sort of out there thing. And I think people go along with it because that is part of your culture. And obviously, and some people feel more comfortable with it than others. And you may never actually realize until you stop and look that there are people that are less comfortable with it. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like I didn't participate in things. I went to parties and things like that. And, sometimes I went with friends. So, I had a really good time. And sometimes I didn't go with many people I knew. So I had a less good time, because, as introverts, you like to move with your safety buffer, right? Socially.
Yes.
Couple of people that so that you're ensured, you're assured of having a decent conversation, right? No matter what's going on with the music.
Yes. You can hide in a corner and have a nice conversation.
Exactly. And so I was always that person. Now, in terms of where me as a Black woman plays into it, that was more the case when I was working in the UK, where again, I think it was a case of, no, I'm not the one that's putting my hand up and volunteering to participate for in things. I'm not the most vocal one. But I think over time, as you get to talk to people one-on-one, then they realize, yeah, there is something in there, because often people would have an initial perception. And I think also they're predisposed to have that perception because the way that Black people have often been portrayed historically has not been that positive. It's been very negative, let's be honest. Okay. So in terms of intelligence, for example.
Yeah.
So it's almost like I was constantly coming across people that were surprised by my education, were surprised by the fact that I had traveled, were surprised that I spoke a couple of languages, you know. And so it's very difficult for me to say where that crossed between, you know, part of it, a lot of it was because I was a Black woman.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of it was because I was a Black woman. But another part of it was because I was not putting myself out there because I was an introvert. So I didn't do myself any favors. And people would only find out these things about me later. Right. Now, I say all of that and I don't regret. I'm very happy being an introvert. Very, very happy. But I also recognize that there are situations in which, you know, it would be nice to tap into a little bit of extroversion for 5 minutes and be able to put yourself out there, right?
And actually, that brings me to ask the question, do you think that being an introvert, you would struggle because putting up your hand and doing things is not because you don't want to, but it's because, I guess, taking the lead. So I'm trying to relate it to leadership now, how that might then affect the opportunities available to you as an introvert to get leadership opportunities, because it's all about proving that hard, that out there kind of persona. Do you think that that also impacts on, you know, getting to that leadership position as well?
I think it can. It can, because, you know, as an introvert, I am not the person that's going to be out there schmoozing. You know, I am not going to be taking part in those bonding activities, you know, after work. If it's something that I can achieve by writing or by talking to people one-on-one, then that's definitely a level playing field and possibly even in my favor as an introvert. If it's something that requires, you know, faking extroversion, then yeah, definitely I'm going to be starting from behind. But of course, introverts are great leaders too, as you well know, because we are good at reading people, right? So that means we're good at using people, putting them in the place where they can play to their strengths and really bringing a team together. And this is something I only discovered about myself very recently, a few years ago, because I was kind of thrust into a leadership role with a local organization. And it turned out I did a decent job of it, even though I was quite terrified at the start, right? But, you know, there's a way in which you fall back on your, okay, what needs to be done? Let me look at what's the best way to do it. Let's see if we can put some people into the right places to get things done, and let's pull it all together. So, yeah.
And I guess the main point to say is that some people, you know, there is this, oh, everybody's has challenges, you know, you don't come with your whole. I remember somebody, I was inviting them to my group and I said, oh, I call it the visionary introverted woman. And she said, oh, I don't like labels. I'm introverted, but I don't like labels because then it means that I have an issue. I said, but do you have an issue? Is introversion an issue for you? No. Are you introverted? Yes. Let's call a spade a spade. If I say I'm introverted and people see that as an issue, then, you know, that's up to them. I'm not trying to label myself. I'm just trying to tell you that this is how I operate and this is who I am. And I'm happy. And it's not a negative term. And by the time I explained to her, I said, if your perception of being introverted is negative, then that's the problem, isn't it? So, and I feel like one of the things that challenges people, so I've met and working in the introvert space, there are challenges around relationships as well, because the need to find solitude and the need to go away a bit can make people think, oh, she's boring, don't invite her. And many have said, I don't have friends. But also there's a tendency for introverts to want deep relationship as opposed to superficial, a few friends. So, but then that kind of leads to exclusion. And so would you say that it's important, regardless of what people think, to highlight the challenges that introverts face, because then you can address them and put strategies in place?
I think it's very, very important to recognize those challenges, for people in companies to recognize the different strengths of people who are introverts and people who are extroverts, and to use those strengths appropriately. I want to go back actually to your question about culture, because growing up when I did, there were certain norms of behavior that were expected. So, you could be shy, but that didn't mean that you didn't say hello, auntie, right?
Yes.
Exactly, right. So I think the good thing about that is that in that context, you learn how to move in the world, even if you don't feel like doing a particular thing. And that is actually very useful in helping you to navigate through the rest of your life. Because I think we also have to recognize, yes, we're introverted. Yes, it's a wonderful thing, but sometimes you have to be able to do what you need to do to get by in the world as well. You need to be able to have conversations with people. And, by all means, use your strengths, as we were talking about earlier. And I think if you're in a leadership position, in a management position, it's helpful to recognize what your colleague's personality is, so that you can get the best out of them. And so, don't assign your introverts to do a presentation with no preparation. Assign your introverts to do the work where they can go away and do research and be super prepared. And that's how you'll get the best out of them.
And I think that, so when we talk about that, actually, we come to talk about owning your strengths. So it's about helping introverts to own strengths that they probably immediately don't recognize. Because I think what happens in the beginning is that first withdrawal, and then withdrawing even more. I find that introverts being misunderstood creates that even further withdrawal. So being able to come out of your shell, or being able to come out and be yourself, your authentic self, is not going to, I remember having to give myself permission. And one big one is where I would walk off by myself and go for lunch break. And everybody was like, let's go for lunch together. Let's go and eat it. And I'm thinking, not today, Jose, because I am not going to survive. I just need a book, and I need a corner, and I just eat my food. Otherwise, my brain is going to explode. But that then is interpreted as,
you're standoffish. You're aloof.
Yes, and you're not really very friendly. And in the end, you are actually excluded from a lot of things, what we call maybe office gossip, that makes a difference to you or whatever. So I think those things happen, and they're real, and they're challenges, and people probably struggle to admit that that what happens to you, and you kind of carry it as a burden. So we want to help, because we navigate our own journeys. We're not perfect, but we also have developed strategies that will help somebody else. So what would you say are some of the key things to highlight when it comes to owning your strength as an introvert? We've said some of them, but we can just emphasize them again. So, for example, leadership, you've mentioned one. If you're an introvert looking to go into a leadership position, what do you need to know about your strength and use?
I think you need to know, and you need to know, for example, how you communicate best, right? And I'm willing to bet that in many cases this is going to be in writing. So use that strength in order to make an impression, right? You know that you are not going to be great in large meetings. So have one-on-one meetings with the people that you need to talk to and prepare, because you're great at preparation, right? And try not to overschedule yourself. Back-to-back meetings can be extremely draining. So give yourself permission to, as Patience said, go off somewhere. You know, if your office has a quiet room, to go into the quiet room for half an hour and recharge so that you can continue to face the day. You know, I think those things are very important, but also knowing that, you know, just because the world out there tends towards the extroverted, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. That being introverted is a wonderful thing, and it's something that you can use. It can be a strength, and you know, you can use that inner focus to get really good at pulling teams together. You know, to get really good at seeing people and motivating them. I think introverts are really good at that.
Yes. And I think recognizing those, because I created a program called Harness Your Strengths and Thrive. And the reason I did that is because when you recognize those key things you talk about, which is that one-on-one connection with people that you're leading, allowing you to get to know them better. Therefore, even in a team scenario, you are able to allocate people according to their strengths because you've taken the time to know them. So also, you know, it's more like you have a rich world. So I say, you know, you have a rich inside world there that allows you for creativity. So if you want to harness that ability to think and think deeply, how do you use that to actually do something different? You need the courage to do something different, to challenge the norm and do it different because your head and your brain has worked it out that it can be done differently. So that's how you harness some of those strengths. But you know, one of the things I also say is if you're struggling to be seen, I started wearing lots of color because I knew that was the way to be loud. I didn't have to talk. I just had to walk in with an orange dress and it would be a conversation starter. Of course, I would wear what didn't blend with my skin, but I stopped wearing dark colors because I would also disappear again. And again, I'm also not talking and I'm also not being seen. So you need those little things to help you. But yeah, so
I do remember that one of my strategies was having a lot of one-on-one conversations, you know. So having, you know, you'd run ideas past different people that might be involved. So when it came to the meeting time, you already knew that you had some support for it, which made it much easier to then raise an issue, right? And so that was one of the strategies that I used. I don't know if I realized it was a strategy at the time. It was just how I felt comfortable. I'd say, oh, so what do you think about this? And then, you know, then I'd have another conversation with someone else. And before you knew it, we'd have some sort of consensus even before we got into a meeting setting, right? And, you know, I think it's really important for introverts to know that, you know, we don't have to conform to the common perception of what introversion is. That you can, you know, you can, as an introvert, put yourself out there for a limited period of time. And so it's about preparing yourself and harnessing your energy so that you can do what you need to do for that half hour, for those 45 minutes, for that hour, and then taking the time, you know, you need afterwards to decompress and recharge.
And I think the word energy plays a lot. It's about recognizing that your energy gets depleted and you don't show up with vibrancy. So when you have a lot of energy, it's not about being loud. It's the way you then show up with a lot of vibrancy. But when that is depleted because you have done too much peopling, you begin to look inauthentic because you're actually like, oh, I can't wait for this to be over. So it's more like you're doing more damage because people are thinking, doesn't she like me? Why is she so, you know, withdrawn? Whereas if you took the time and you went away and came back, then you're vibrant again. You're engaged again. you disengage straight away once your brain's had enough. It's not something you can actually control. It just goes pop, almost like so. But recognizing all of these allows you to build the right business. I always talk about alignment, allows you to find the right work environment. And I know that sometimes it's difficult. Us growing up, us running our lives, you feel like I don't have a choice. But I'm bringing up my children to have lots of choices. I know they are also introverted. So I say to them, create choices, have choices. When you're going to look for work, don't just go with the desperation of the salary. Look at the environment, because that is going to affect your performance, is going to affect your capability to survive and thrive there. So do they insist on certain things that you can't cope with? Do they, so many things. And because I know them, I could advise, for example, my son who got a job, I could advise him on the key things he could look for, other than just how much they are paying me and location. And it helped because he got combinations and he does work where he needs to be in the job and, thinking about it a lot. That helps you if you decide to be, if you're an introvert. So I think that it's harnessing your strengths. Like I said, I created that because I say, reveal to yourself, we might be introverts together, but we would have different challenges. Yes. And so it's revealing to yourself your own combination of challenges. I think that's the first step I always take people through. Reveal to yourself your own combination. Then how do you remove any barriers? So you've got to exist in the world. You've got to actually, it's not the existence that is the bit that I think is the creation of an inclusive world. You need to participate to create the world, to create the kind of world. If you don't, you will pound to everybody else's design, isn't it? So in order to be able to live in a world that includes you, that recognizes you, that gives you some space to be yourself, you've got to participate in creating it, isn't it?
You have to create space.
Yeah.
You have to create space.
So that is what I think. So I think, we've talked about some things, key things here is recognize your style and work to bring it to the fore, work to use it effectively. Recognize that you need the time and space and the benefits of having that time and space. Recognize your gift in connecting and doing it the other way, because people have been asking me, how did you get to 5,000 people? I said, well, I went in messages and I spoke to people. Many of those 5,000 I've been in networking events with. When I come back, I sit down and I plug in and I connect and I can say, hi, we met here. And I just wanted to, and I've done a lot of that. That's a strength you can tap into. And then we've talked about the fact that sometimes you need to speak up, and preparation gives you the strength to speak up more. So, for example, if you want to be a keynote speaker or you want to be a public speaker, you might have to do a lot more work because you can't just go and charisma people into you are a deep person, so you might go sit down and have and and understand what you want to say. So any other words of wisdom that you'd want to share? We've said a lot of things, but there might be key things that you want to share with the audience, you want to bring to the fore.
I think the main message that I want introverts watching this to take away is that introversion is actually a superpower. You just have to learn how to use it effectively.
Yeah,
I truly believe that. And
to understand when your kryptonite comes, isn't it?
Avoid
Superman has kryptonite.
Avoid the kryptonite and use it as a strength. Use the strengths. If anybody had asked me when I was being described as a shy child, if I would be, taking part in podcasts, presenting in summits and things like that, I would have said, no, that would never happen. But through learning to do my preparation and use the strengths that I have as an introvert, I've been able to do some of those things. And I think that any introvert who is willing to put in the time to understand themselves can use that introversion as a superpower, because people will then come back and say, wow, I learned so much, that was so rich, because we're good at creating rich, empowering experiences for people. That's something that we're very good at as introverts. And I'm not saying extroverts aren't too. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that part of our strength in that inner world, in that research, is in being able to pull those things together. And so we can use that. We can use that to make an impact, even if it's not a make some noise kind of impact.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's important to remember that a lot of the innovations we have in the world today is a known fact that introverts created it, because they kind of say, why not? I find myself, even from childhood, when somebody, and I find my kids, especially my daughter, she'll say, why not? Is that question of why can't it be that way? Or why can't it be different? If you find yourself you challenge that, then explore that, because an invention is about to be born. Apple came and all those things, isn't it? Yeah. So you were saying?
Yes, I was also going to say, learn to say yes to things. Learn to say yes to things. Sometimes there's this tendency to shrink back and not take advantage of opportunities. Now, you don't have to say yes to everything, but sometimes something will come along and it will challenge you a little bit, but it will move you along that continuum of being able to do more as an introvert. Okay.
Yes.
That is actually
how
I ended up doing the anti-racism courses. That the co-founder of the Beyond School said, I think I've been reading your newsletter, you'd be a great person to do this course. And so I said yes. And then I went away and did research to create it. Now, I've created courses before, of course, as a former educator, but still it was a challenge. But sometimes you have to say yes to the challenge and trust that your introversion, that the skills you have as an introvert are going to carry you through and help you to make a real impact with it.
Oh, I like that. So you talked about newsletter, and I received your very rich newsletter. So, it's a nice segue into talking about what you provide, like your newsletter. How can people access you, or?
Oh, okay. So my main website is on sharonhh.com, which has links to pretty much everything. My current pride and joy is my anti-racism newsletter, which is on antiracism.substack.com. I also teach with the Beyond School, which is beyondschool.co. And I'm doing 2 streams of courses there. I'm doing anti-racism courses for kids and adults. There's a short 6-week course. I do an anti-racism workshop, which happens every couple of months. And I co-facilitate a monthly allies group for doing ongoing work on anti-racism. Is there anything else?
And you also write, isn't it? You teach people to do some writing as well.
Oh, yes, that's the other course. That's the other course. I've just started a course with them, which is the 3rd iteration of a course I launched a couple years ago, called The Business of Writing. And so this is about helping people who want to become freelance writers, start out the right way, and identify the right clients, get their website set up to attract them, and learn how to market themselves online. So a lot of stuff.
So I'll put some links down, at the end of this, but basically get in touch with Sharon, connect with her. She has always very interesting posts on LinkedIn, and her newsletters are very rich. They're enlightening. The Introvert Sisters as well, the podcast that she didn't mention, they're fun to listen to, and they were analyzing Bridgerton the last time, and basically they were talking about how they needed to be off camera for a reason, just to recharge. They're unapologetic in Introvert Sisters, and I think one of the key things about leadership that I found, it's not about titles, it's about influence. When you give yourself permission to be yourself, people that are looking up to you get that as permission to be themselves as well. So you kind of help people. And I think, like with your podcast, that's what happens. Like with what I'm trying to do here is step out and say, I'm proud to be an introvert. I have my own challenges as an introvert. I'm not going to deny that it held me back in some things. I had to figure out how to harness my true strengths and allow them to shine and be audacious is the word about it. And so I'm hoping that that gives people permission to say, if she's out there doing it, if Sharon's out there doing it, and they're still defining and creating an inclusive world where introverts and extroverts will have fun and exist nicely and co-create. So we can also step out and do that. So that is part of what I'm trying to do today. And I want to thank you so much, for the rich conversation we've had. And I hope that people have taken a lot of points from it. As it's usual with when I do inspiration to achieve, I always end with quotes. And so first I want to start by saying some extroverts might be thinking, oh, give me a break, So I want to encourage you that your introverted colleagues, I have a lot of beautiful extroverts that really help me to get out of my shell and also go loud. I think I need that sometimes. I'll be like, who are you dancing? Okay, I'll dance with you for 5 seconds and then I'll go back and not dance again. So I need those kind of people in my life, and I'm glad to have that. So, but here's a quote that I want to say. The highest form of love is to be the protector of another person's solitude. So for the extroverts out there, how do you love your introverts? You be a protector of their solitude. That's by Raina Marie Reich. I love that, because that is how if you want to love your introvert, be a protector of their solitude. Don't be like my husband that will come dancing in front of me when all I want to do is just watch telly. I'm just kidding. I mean, he's also introverted, but it's just sometimes I'm thinking I'm probably more than he is. So what about introverts? What quote do I want to live with you? And this is it. Quiet people have the loudest minds. So your mind is rich, is very rich. And so that's by Stephen Hawking. And you can imagine how intelligent he was.
Yeah.
So you might not be making a lot of noise, but because your mind is very loud, you can extract that noise and put it out to the world in writing, like Sharon is doing, in speaking in summits, and you'll be a great keynote speaker even if you're introverted, because when you get into the room, you give your one or two pieces and go away. You don't have to be everywhere, like Sharon said. So that's what I want to share with you, and also the wisdom that if you are giving yourself permission to be yourself, whether introverts or extroverts around you, they will learn to be themselves as well. So increasingly, as you get older, especially speaking to women now, it's time, if you're getting older, give yourself permission to be your introverted self and your proud introverted self, and allow people to know you from that space, because you build authentic relationships as a result. So we'll put on a few links, and I hope that by joining me, or when you watch a replay, get on YouTube and watch a replay on LinkedIn or Facebook, communicate and let me know, hashtags replay, communicate and let me know, how did you find this? Thank you to those that joined live, and just want to wish everybody well. And thank you to Sharon for joining me today. And I'm sure we'll meet again and have more rich conversations. But in the meantime, I want to say, connect with us, contact us. We love to connect with people on a one-to-one. We love to engage. More importantly, if you don't have anybody in your circle that is rooting for your success, myself and Sharon want you to know that we're rooting for your success. So thank you again, Sharon, and take care and have a lovely rest of the week for everybody. Take care. God bless.
Thank you.